Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Linda. Here on this channel, I share videos about sewing, pattern drafting, and everything fashion. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you guys how to draft and sew this beautiful Ankara gown with frills. If this seems like what you're interested in, you might want to take a pause and subscribe so you can dive into the main video. The first thing I did was to fold my fabric in two to draft the upper bodice, and I went ahead to draw the starting line. From that starting line, I measured half of my shoulder armhole, and then I marked 7.5 inches for that. I also went down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope, and I drew another half of an inch for the shoulder joining above here, just like this. Next, I placed my tape rule below the shoulder slope for the armhole. The armhole is 16 inches divided by 2, which equals 8 inches, and I just went ahead to rule the line respectively. After connecting the lines, the next thing I did was to mark the vertical measurement. Starting from the tip of the neckline, I measured my bust point, which is 10.5, okay, and then my under bust is equal to 14. I went upwards by half of an inch to make it 13.5, and then the waistline, which is 17 inches. I also added half inch to join the waistline, and I'm just going to connect the lines horizontally. So guys, the next thing I did was to mark her nipple to nipple measurement, which is 7 inches divided by 2 equals to 3.5. So I'm marking 4 inches because I am drafting directly on my fabric and not my pattern paper. So I'm adding her half of an inch I am supposed to add later on. So I'll just go ahead and connect the lines like you see me doing. And after that, I'll be coming inwards at this point, around under the bust line. I'll be marking half of an inch like this. And then I'll be going outwards at this point as well. I'll be marking 1.5 inches. And then I'll connect the lines. This is to form my dart. The next thing I did was to draw a curve for the bust, starting from 1 inch below the bust line. And I'm just going to do the same thing as well on the opposite side. When drawing the shape of your cup with your curved ruler, ensure that your hand is not bent and your line is not very curved, to avoid something looking very funny. Heading back to the armhole, I divided what I have there by 2 and I got the midpoint. That is going to enable me to craft out my armhole princess dart. So I'll just go ahead and just mark this line and connect it with my curved ruler up until the mark I gave at the armhole line. And then I also gave about 1 inch mark at this point just to eliminate puffiness. And then I added that same 1 inch I took away at this point to prevent shortage of fabric. And then the next steps to take is the body measurement, starting with the bust circumference. Quarter of the bust circumference is what I am marking right now, and then I'll be adding 2 inches for the stitching allowance. I also marked the same measurement at the bust point line. And then heading to the under bust line, I measured what I have there. The under bust circumference divided by 4 plus the dart intake allowance. And then also the stitching allowance of 2 inches. And also on the waistline, I measured what I have there and put the necessary measurement plus the dart intake and then the general stitching allowance before cutting it out. After cutting out the patterns, I went upwards at this point by 3.5 inches at the top of the neckline just to mark my initial neckline, which I'll be using later on. So this is not the neckline I'm going to use. I'm just marking it out for me to know where I'm going to start from. And here's the front piece, which is basically the princess dart bust here. And next we'll be cutting out the back piece. I folded my fabric into two to draft out the back piece, and I marked this line above it as the starting line. So I'm going to be marking out the zipper line, and then I will be connecting it way down with my ruler. And after I was done with that, I went ahead to mark the shoulder measurement. I also marked the shoulder measurement which I have for the front piece. So what I'm doing here is exactly what I have for the front, just that the difference is the bust area. So I marked 1 inch for the shoulder slope and went downwards to mark the half of the armhole measurement, which is 8 inches, and I'll be connecting that with my ruler respectively. What I'm actually doing at the top is marking the shoulder slope plus the half inch joining for the shoulder because I had almost forgotten about it. So next I place my tape rule at the tip like this, and I'll be marking the bust point measurement, which is not really needed at the back piece. And also I will be marking the under bust and the waistline. Honestly, I'm supposed to mark only the waist measurement, but that's okay. So I connected the lines, which will enable me to mark the body measurements. The next thing I did was to mark half of the nipple to nipple measurement, which is 4 inches like I did for the front, and then I'll be marking the same thing all the way down to the waistline. And after that, I'm just going to connect the line. This will enable me to create a 1-inch dart for the back dart. And yes, the front piece is always longer than the back piece. You can see it from the way I'm placing it, and that is why I drafted it separately. But after working on the princess dart bustier, they both become equal. So I went ahead to draft a rough line like this for the back dart, but then the line isn't the way I wanted it to look like. So I cleaned it and drew the line again. Okay, so I know that my line is not straight and my hand is not straight, but let's just leave it like that. So guys, next thing I did was to place my tape rule from that zipper allowance line. I measured the quarter of my bust circumference and I'm just marking that like you see me doing. And then I added 1 inch for the dart intake and also 1.5 inches for the stitching allowance. And then I did the same thing on the other 2 lines as well. Connected the necessary lines and then cut it out. So guys, at this point where I marked the zipper allowance, I went in with by half of an inch and then I trimmed it out. After I was done cutting up everything, this is how it looks. And then I'll go ahead and notch this point on the front piece like you see me doing. This is to know the exact place where the bust point meets, and it will enable me to stitch it correctly. So guys, that is all we have for the front and the back piece. The next thing to do right now is to go ahead and draft the lower part, which is the skirt pattern. And then I'll also add the linings and then the stay for the front piece. To draft the skirt pattern, I folded my fabric like this into 2 equal halves to get the widest part of the lower body, which is the hip line, and then I drew a starting line to measure the waistline. I also gave half of an inch above for the joining. And I placed my tape rule from 17 inches to subtract my half length from the total length of my gown. I also went ahead to mark the hip line, which is 9 inches, and then the knee line followed by the length. After marking the length of my gown, I went ahead to connect it with my ruler, and then the remaining part which I have left is my hemming allowance. So to get my knee line, I divided the distance from the hip line to the gown length, and then I got the midpoint, which will serve as the knee line. I also went upwards by 2 inches to mark another line for my knee line and discarded the previous one. And I also went ahead to connect the rest of the line. Heading back to the waistline, I measured 7 inches for the quarter of the waistline measurement and then I marked it. I also gave 1 inch for the dart intake and then 2 inches for the stitching allowance. Then at the hip line, I measured quarter of a hip circumference plus the 2-inch general stitching allowance. And also at the knee line, I used quarter of a hip measurement minus 1 inch. You can go ahead and minus 1.5. This is determined by how wide or how tight you want it to be around your knees. I'll also use the same measurement on my knee line on the hem line. So I'll just go ahead and connect this part like this using my curved ruler and then shaping out the skirt. After cutting out the skirt pattern for the front, I went ahead to trim out the excesses around this part because I do not need that. Only left with ½ inch, I went ahead to notch the midpoint as well. So I went in wet at this point for the dart intake, and I'll be using my center front on my upper bodice as my guide. After marking the dart intake, I went ahead to notch that part, and then it's time to draft the back skirt. So guys, I folded another layer of fabric into 2 and then I gave 2 inches for the zipper allowance and I extended the hip line. That will be a guide for me to craft out the shape for the back. From the hip line, I went downwards by 5 inches. You can use 5 inches or 6 inches. So I'll just measure 1 inch inwards from that part. This is to allow your skirt to fit more perfectly when putting it on. And then I'll use my curved ruler to shaping it out like this. From the part where I measured 1 inch, I'm just going to maintain that 1 inch all the way down to the length of the gown. After that, I went ahead to cut it out. So you see, it's very easy and simple to achieve, even if you are a beginner. After cutting it out, I went ahead to trim the excesses at the upper part like this, and then I notched the zipper area, the part where the zipper allowance began. And I also went ahead and notched this part of the hip line so that I could differentiate between the two sides. And that is all we have to do for the drafting of the skirt. To sew the pieces together, I'll be starting with my front piece, and then I'm just going to be adding my wadding and my hairstay. Actually, I'll be using my hairstay and I'll be tripling it as my wadding. So I added my hairstay on both my lining piece and my main fabric. And the first thing I would do is to separate my lining piece from my main fabric. I also went ahead to do the same thing for the back piece as well. So I arranged my front piece like this, just where I want it to look like, and I'm just going to show you guys how to stitch it on the machine. If you notice, I did not cut the neckline, so the front is just looking plain and there's no design of neckline whatsoever. That will be something I'll be doing later on. So you just go ahead and stitch these two sides one after the other on your machine. To stitch it, you are going to be placing them like this, and then you're going to be running a stitch all the way to the top like this. And also you go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. This is it after I was done stitching everything together. So this is how it looks like. The next thing I'll be doing right now is just to go ahead and iron it out, and then I will be notching these two parts all the way like this, and then I'll do the same thing for my lining piece. So guys, after I was done notching the front, I did the same thing for my lining piece, and it's time to press them both. After I was done pressing, this is how it looks like, and then the next thing I did was to cover those rough areas with another strip of hairstay just to secure it in place, and then I went ahead to work on the back piece. First, you need to open up your back piece like this and then place the necessary patterns next to each other, and after that you just fold it up this way and stitch it on your machine upwards. And also you are going to do the same thing on the second one as well, while you repeat the same process on the lining piece. This is how it looks like after I was done stitching up both the main fabric and the lining piece. I also went ahead to top stitch on it, and this is how the lining part looks like as well. You can see it's very neat. So next thing I'll be doing right now, just to go ahead and fold in the zipper allowance. This is to enable me to cut out both the front and the back neckline together. So I'll just go ahead and fold this by 2 inches we used to cut it out. This is how it is. I've already folded it by 2 inches as you can see, and then I'll go ahead and place the front piece like this right on top of it. You can make sure that the front part is matching correctly, and then do not forget the lining part, please. Just place them the way it would be if you are wearing it on your body. So just arrange it this way, making sure that the points are matching once again, and then you're going to be needing your pins to pin this place together to hold it in place while cutting. Make sure that the middle part is meeting each other, and just arrange everything the way you want it to be to get a nice cut. You also need to place the second part together and also secure it with your pins to keep it in place so it doesn't move when you start cutting. After pinning, you need to choose either one of these sides to cut your neckline. And it's totally optional to choose any side you like. So I'll be making use of this particular side, and I'll be going downwards by half of an inch to exclude the shoulder joining. The rest of the part is where I'll be placing my tape rule. Okay, so I'll be going downwards by 3.5 inches. You can make use of 4 inches or even 4.5 inches, depending on the amount of flesh you want to reveal. So I'll just mark my measurements here, and I'll connect it straight to this part like this. To prevent it from choking the neck, you need to go ahead and curve your hand like this with your free hand, or better still, you need to use your curved rulers to achieve this. After drawing out my line, I decided to go upwards by half of an inch, and I just slanted it into the initial line. This is to create a space for the joining allowance before cutting it out. So this is what I have after I was done cutting out both the front and the back neckline, and this is how neat everything is looking like. So next thing I'll be doing right now is to unpin it, and then I'm going to be stitching the necklines together. So for the front piece, I'm going to be placing them right side to right sides facing each other, and then I'll go ahead and stitch it by half of an inch all the way like this to the top. And after that, I'll go ahead and stitch the neckline for the back piece. I'll just arrange it the way it's supposed to be, right side to right side facing each other, and I'll be stitching it by 1/2 inch at the top like this. First of all, top stitch it as well before stitching it along the side. So here's the front piece after I was done stitching it, and the next thing I'll do is just to go ahead and notch it all the way around the neckline. And then for the back, I also notched it all around the neckline. Next thing is just to go ahead and top stitch on it on the lining part, just like you see me pointing. This is just the way to top stitch on it. And also I'll do the same thing on the remaining parts. This is how it looks like after I was done notching and pressing. I also stitched the sides as well, as you can see, and then I pressed the neckline. This is how beautiful it is on the inside. I'm just loving how neat and beautiful it's looking already. So for the lower part, I've gone ahead to cut out the lining piece and I also stitched them together while I was stitching the front part because I don't want this video to be really long. So this is how the front piece looked like on the skirt pattern, and the next thing I'll be doing right now is just to go ahead and press them very nicely, and this is how it came out looking like after I was done pressing. The next thing I'll be doing right now is to merge them together, and also I'll go ahead and include the dart. I'll be taking the dart measurement for the front on both sides and then the back as well. So I'll be using the front as a guideline to take the dart. I'll just pin it this way and then stitch it on both sides. And also I'll go ahead and do the same thing on the back piece. This is how it looks like after I was done stitching up both the darts and the waistline together. So you can see that the dart has been closed and then the other part as well is done. The next thing to do right now is just to go ahead and work on my back piece and fix my zipper on the zipper allowance. And as you can see, the front piece has been done as well, and I'll have one full piece as a gown. So the next thing I'll be doing right now is just to go ahead and properly fix my zipper, and I'm going to show you guys how I always do it. So I'll be folding my zipper allowance upwards like this, and I'm just going to press it nicely to create a crease line with my pressing iron. And then after that, I'll be taking my measurement for my zipper. Since I'm using a 24 inches long zipper, I'll just go ahead and mark 21 inches or 22 inches like you see me doing. And then from that part, I'll be using that line to determine the rest of the measurement for the slit. So to know the length of measurement which I'll be needing to stitch in between the zipper and the slit, I'll just go ahead and place my tape rule like this, and then I'll take the full length of the skirt. Whatever I have there, I'll be dividing it into 2 equal halves to get the midpoint. And then I'll be marking that part with a chalk line. And now I am left with the space in the middle to stitch together just like this. And also whatever I have left will become my slit. So I decided to go upwards by extra 2 inches, and then I'll shorten the length of this part. So I'll just go ahead and stitch this part, and this is how it looks like. I've gone ahead to fix the zipper and I've stitched the middle part, and then I ironed out my slit. This is how it looks like. So the next thing I'll be doing right now is to take my hemming gum and then close this part of the slit instead of stitching them down. So I'll just place my hemming gum in between this part like this, and I'll be using my pressing iron to activate the heat just to keep it in place and also achieve a finishing touch. And this is how it looks like after I was done. Heading over to the sleeve, I'll first of all cut the off-shoulder sleeve, which is about 46 inches long and then 20 inches wide because it's a balloon sleeve. So I'll just go ahead and place them this way, and I'll be cutting out this portion of the sleeve for the off shoulder using my front piece as a guide. This is like the easiest way you can achieve this off shoulder sleeve. So just go ahead and cut out this part, and then you have your off shoulder sleeve. I also didn't forget to fold the top and the bottom part just to make a casing for the elastic. So I'll just go ahead and pass my elastic into the channel I created. The size of elastic I'll be using for the upper part is her shoulder measurement divided by 2, and I'm just going to cut that out using my tape rule as a guide. After cutting that out, the next thing I'll be cutting is the elastic for the lower part. In this case, I'll be using 9 inches. I know you're probably wondering why I am cutting 2 pieces of elastic for each casing. This is because I initially cut out 2 off-shoulder sleeve, but I ended up just making use of 1 sleeve. After passing the elastic to the casing for the off-shoulder sleeve, I went ahead to cut out my basic sleeve as a flare, which is also known as a balloon sleeve. So this is going to be my sleeve for the other parts of the shoulder. And then after cutting it out, I went ahead to also make a channel for the elastic at the lower parts. After I was done passing the elastic into the casing, I'll be setting them aside to work on the gown itself. So I just went ahead to place the 2 front and back piece right side to right side facing each other, and then I'll be stitching the shoulder area like this. After that, this is what I have, and then I'll be attaching the sleeves. So I'll be placing the part of the off shoulder sleeve like this, right side to right side facing the main fabric, and then I'll be using my pins to secure it in place before stitching it down. After stitching down the first sleeve, I went ahead to stitch the second sleeve. Then I discovered that the armhole area was not equal, and so I decided to retake the armhole measurement. I went ahead to place my tape rule at the top of the shoulder like this, and then I measured 8 inches for the original armhole measurement I did initially, and then I'll just go ahead and connect the lines like this using my curve ruler to carve out a new armhole, and then I trimmed out the excess fabric. So guys, this is what I have left. I'll just go ahead and fix the second sleeve. We are done with the sleeves. This is how it looks like after I was done with everything. Then the next thing I will do is to turn it inside out and then stitch the sides at the upper area, just around the waistline. So I'll just go ahead and align it together and then stitch it at this point, making sure to stop at this point. I'll be placing a pin to secure that place in place before stitching that area down. And I'll also do the same thing at the other side. After I was done pinning, I went ahead to stitch it upwards to the sleeves, and then the remaining part is where I'll be inserting my ruffle. For the ruffles, I cut out 2 long pieces of about 2 yards and 1/4 inches and 7 inches width. So I've already gone ahead to hem it all around like this and even all the way down to the bottom of the ruffle, and I'll be fixing that shortly. So to fix it, you need to place it this way on your fabric, making sure to use the right side. Although this fabric does not really have much difference between the right and the wrong side. So I'll just go ahead and place one of the ruffles in between my gown, just like this, and I'll be pinning that all the way down to distribute my ruffles evenly along the line. So guys, this is what it looks like after I was done with my ruffles, and this is how it's going to look like after stitching it down. So I'll just go ahead and repeat the same thing on the opposite side and finish it up. And then I'll be placing my back piece above it like this and stitch it down at 2 inches stitching allowance I gave initially. This is how beautiful it came out looking like. If you like this video, kindly hit the subscribe button and share. I'll see you guys in my next video.